Hello and welcome to my channel. Try This is a series where I talk about interesting commanders, and today we're going to be talking about Korvold Fae-Cursed King. If you enjoyed this content, then please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps other viewers discover the content I produce and is a great way to show support. With that said, let's dive in. Korvold is a 4/4 dragon noble with flying that costs 2 black, red, green. Whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, sacrifice another permanent. Also, whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on him and draw a card. I wanted to do a throwback commander while we wait for more Phyrexian previews to come in. Korvold felt like a good one to start with since there's been so many new ways to enable him since he was initially released in 2019. He really cranks up the potential value from all the crazy treasure producing effects released over the last couple of years. Korvold is really good, but he has two major downsides when you go to make a list for him. One, he's generally not budget friendly if you're looking for a more tuned list. I normally don't build budget lists or try to cater to that in my videos. I think budget is really subjective, so I try to just suggest a variety of ways to take the list with various options. That way you all can make more informed decisions since you know what's best for your own wallet. Though you could build a budget list with Korvold, many Aristocrat style game plans and cards aren't that budget friendly. They don't often get reprinted, and it's a very popular deck type in EDH which generally just drives up the price. Yahenni and Viserys are pretty budget friendly, but more reliable Salka outlets like Ashnod's Altar or Altar of Dementia are way more expensive, at least compared to them. 2, he's got one of the biggest reputations in EDH. I'd say he's up there with Atraxa, Muldrotha, and Urza, and instantly letting your opponents know shenanigans are about to happen the second you show who you're playing. When it comes to threat detection, you're already on the radar just playing Korvold. With those downsides out of the way, he's just fun, interesting, and generally a great commander to run. He's got a ton of value potential that's aged very well over the past couple of years. Sacrificing things in general are probably the best in these 3 colors. He also doesn't care what type of permanent you sacrifice or if it's a token or not. This really opens up what's possible and honestly makes him incredibly abusable. With such a powerful draw effect in the command zone, it makes the deck rather consistent and satisfying to play. You're normally good in mana since you have access to green, and you're even more incentivized to play into treasures. You normally have gas in your hand because of all the draws, and you're able to reliably light the fire with all the mana. If you're an enfranchised player, you probably don't need to know more about him. It's kind of like explaining why Rhystic Study is good. Though, if you're newer to EDH or looking to expand into a more tuned and higher power list, let me show you why he's so good. First off is treasures. This innocent looking token has been taking over EDH over the past couple years. Though they're temporary, the boost they give your deck should not be understated, as they can lead to explosive or entirely game-ending turns. Since it has become more and more reliable to make these tokens, they've enabled all sorts of ways to win the game, for example Revel in Riches, or synergize amazingly well with other cards like our commander. In this deck, they essentially say, tap and sacrifice this artifact to make 1 mana of any color, draw a card, and buff your commander. That's a pretty good deal when there's plenty of ways to make them in these colors. Let's get the heavy hitters out of the way in Dockside, Old Gnawbone, and Ancient Copper Dragon. These are easy budget cuts, and to be honest with you, you don't need any of these cards for the deck to function. I'm just bringing them up first because they're by far the most notorious treasure producing effects running around EDH at the moment, at least in my experience. Somehow more reasonable is the previously mentioned Revel in Riches alongside Bootlegger's Stash and Pitiless Plunderer. Revel provides an easy alternate win condition to pull off with all those effects and is a solid backup plan that just fits the deck. Since we plan on sacrificing creatures to Korvold, the Plunderer just makes sense to add also. Bootleggers just turns lands into treasure producing effects and is very good in general. The Reaver Cleaver, Jolene, and Tireless Provisioner also provide more treasures for us. The Reaver Cleaver is the latest in these absurd treasure producing effects and actually works so well as a Voltron enabler here. It gives Korvold even more evasion while just printing treasures to feed our engine and our commander. Jolene and the Provisioner are just great utility creatures that fit the sub-theme we're setting up. Food tokens will also trigger Korvold, which gives us options for some life gain instead of just mana if we need it. Last up is Deadly Dispute, Big Score, and Curse of Opulence. Deadly Dispute is an amazingly efficient card for this list. For 2 mana and a creature or artifact, we essentially draw 3 cards and make a treasure. There's a few versions of Big Score and other instant speed ways to make treasures. I couldn't get to all of them, but these are some great budget options for Korvold. I know the curse doesn't technically make treasures, it makes a strictly better version of them, but it still works well with Korvold all the same. Other artifacts that sacrifice themselves are also great here. Mind Stone, Hedron Archive, and Wayfarer's Bubble are good examples. These are normally just great budget options in most lists, and they get expanded utility here with Korvold. Touch lands and their basic land counterparts are amazing on this list. This is where things can really start to get expensive. Though Prismatic Vista is a great land to run, really Evolving Wilds feels just as good when you draw cards also. Blighted Woodlands is another great option for a more budget-friendly deck. Removal lands like Strip Mine and Wasteland are also great here, while the deck capitalizes on ramp cards like Harrow. Remember that each instance of sacrificing anything also draws us a card and buffs Korvold. I've only really talked about mana so far, and we're pretty much set for our card draw as well. This is why Korvold can generally be so consistent. Moving on, utility creatures that sacrifice themselves as part of their cost are generally just great in this deck. Steve, Spore Frog, and Burnished Heart are some good examples. Generally, these effects are instant speed, allowing us to perform combat checks with Korvold or get draws and try to respond to our opponent's plays. Other great examples are Haywire Might, Thrashing Brontodon, or old Eldrazi tokens like the ones created by Awakening Zone. They also play great into burn effects. Cards like Mayhem Devil, Bastion of Remembrance, and Blood Artist can push us to victory with all of these creatures we plan to sacrifice. Mayhem Devil is probably the best ping effect we could add since it works with all permanent types and whenever anyone sacrifices them. I'm adding the same combo that I used in my toolbox video. Essentially, we get some sacrifice outlet like Ashnod's Altar or Viscera Seer, which are both great cards in general for this list, then have some ways to give counters to creatures in either Rhythm of the Wild or Mikaeus. Mikaeus in general is just great here to save most of our creatures, though he wouldn't save Korvold, who would likely always have counters. Finally, we need some persist creatures, which I'm adding Murderous Redcap and Puppeteer Click. Essentially, when we sacrifice either of these creatures, Rhythm of the Wild will counter the -1/-1 counters with the Riot ability, or we could sacrifice them again and use Undying instead of Persist to bring them back. Puppeteer will steal everything in our opponent's graveyards, while the Red Cap will just win the game for us. That's a good way to close out the game that fits our theme. These colors have access to so many of these effects. I'm trying to keep my videos a bit shorter and I can't cover them all. I could talk more about ping effects and cards like Sir Conrad, which also sees your opponent's creatures by the way. Ways to generate those creatures with something like Scepter of Celebration, which not only buffs and adds evasion to our commander for our Voltron plan, but will generate a massive amount of tokens for a go-wide strategy and sacrifice fodder. Or I could talk about a million ways to sacrifice those creatures with cards like the Golden Throne, which is not only ramp, but saves us from losing the game at least once. I don't know, there's just a ton of cards to jam in this list. Constant Mist is a fog with a buyback ability that plays into our strategy. Liliana Dreadhorde General will draw us additional cards while also creating things to sacrifice to Korvold. Plum the Forbidden nets us basically double draws per creature we sacrifice, though we'll lose life, it's well worth it. Bottom line, you should never have an issue drawing cards in this deck. Remember that every sacrifice also buffs Korvold permanently by 1. Since he has flying, this can easily put us in a position for a Voltron win. This allows us to double down on the Aristocrat playstyle to buff him, and cut cards that would normally be needed to get us to a threatening position. I think this is why Korvold is so strong. Leaning into an already pretty strong archetype just makes the deck more consistent. If you're looking for a tuned list, then I really think you should give Korvold a try. I didn't cover every card in this deck or every suggestion I have for Korvold, so if you'd like to see the rest, check out the deck list in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Comment below on cards you think synergize well with this commander, and if you have any suggestions for commanders to build in the future. Thank you so much for watching, good luck, and have fun.